Hey, it's Tara. I just want to quickly address a question that I get, probably the most popular question I get of all time, and sometimes from clients, but usually this is from just people that know what I do for a living, and that I work with a lot of people that are dealing with and struggling with anxiety. And I talk a lot about anxiety in that I don't like to label it. I like to call it activation. That's what it is. It's activation in the nervous system. It's a fight or flight response from the reptilian brain, from the primal brain, because we are animals. And so we're constantly scanning for threat. And we're supposed to have a response when that part of our brain registers that something is a threat. So here's the thing. There's a whole bunch of reasons why we are all so anxious and why they're saying that nobody's really immune to anxiety and why it's starting at a younger and younger age. One of the things is that our society, our culture, is really out of sync with how we were created to exist, and the pace of life and the balance of life and the speed of progress and evolving. Technology plays a big part in that. It's going faster than what we can keep up with. I can't even speak fast enough to keep up with it. And so our brains, we're really forcing our brains and our bodies to operate at a pace that isn't healthy, and we keep pushing it to do so. And you can see this in the trends that you see with Silicon Valley, where all of these really young genius minds are struggling to compete in this fast-paced environment and always be the first on the market and come up with the next best thing, and there's no rest, and they're so depressed and they're anxious, and so they're turning to things like psychedelics and microdosing to just try and be more creative and more focused and more productive and more. It's not going to solve their anxiety issues. In fact, it's going to create more. It's going to create more activation in their nervous system, because they're adding a little bit of poison that they think is going to be okay, that helps a symptom, but is really contributing to the overall root cause. So if we take a step back and look at our primal brain, our reptilian brain, it's supposed to survey for threat. It's supposed to survey for life and death threat. However, rarely are we in a situation where it really is life or death. And so in place of that, what we have is this onslaught of oncoming, fast-paced information. We have greater and greater extremes of information delivery and content, and glorified content and horrific content, and all of the things that we might not have heard about as quickly or ever because of where we were locally. Now we have this expansive network where we are all hyper-connected, and we're all getting this huge amount of information at too fast a pace and at a really young age, when our brains are not wired up. They're not really supposed to be receiving this much input at the rate that we're giving it. And so you see that in young kids, we're starting to see anxiety. It's not just video games, it's video games and media and multimedia, and the pace at which even commercials and TV and storylines run, everything is so sped up, and our brains are just trying to take in all the information and figure out what's threat and what's novelty. And so an activated nervous system, a dysregulated nervous system, can't tell the difference between life or death threat and what's just something that's new. Or the primal brain really is an unconscious part of your survival. It is not logical. It can't piece apart what you're witnessing. So if you're watching a horror movie, it's responding. It's giving you the fight or flight response, the adrenaline response, as if you should get away from that situation because it's registering as a threat. So we're really increasing the amount of fight or flight type scenarios, even with just what we're witnessing, what we're consuming through media, what we're consuming in leisure, and that's adding layers of activation to our nervous system. And so our nervous system no longer can tell the difference between real life or death and imaginary life or death. It's really amped up all of the time, in absence of bears chasing us through the woods, although that sometimes happens. It's scanning for threat on a different level. It's really activated by the stimulus that we're giving it, that it was never meant to process at this speed. So it's trying to keep up. We do evolve. The brain can change, but it really requires the opposite to help balance the nervous system. So young kids, we have to be really careful at what we're exposing them to with phones and technology and the kind of things that they're consuming, that they're adding to their brain, because it is creating activation. more than that, they're templating their nervous systems off of you, off of their parents. If you are activated, if you are stressed out, and most of us are as parents, your kids are picking up on that, and so they're feeding off of it. It's not genetic. It's not contagious. It's nothing like that. They're templating off of your nervous system. So they're picking up your pathways, your activation, and then they're mirroring that, because our brains do align with one another. They mirror off of each other. So the people that you spend time with, if they're activated, you're going to be activated, and so are your kids. So this really is the root of why every kid has a little bit of low-level anxiety, and it was something a psychiatrist, child psychiatrist, presented at a conference I was at a few years ago, which is every child right now, if they were scored, if they were marked, presents some low-level anxiety that we didn't have in generations before. The key is to slow down. The key is to adopt practices to help regulate your nervous system. The question is, who needs therapy or medication for anxiety? I don't want to say that nobody needs medication, but I would like to say that most people could use some kind of regulating, self-regulation therapy, or some other kind of regulating practice, so that they don't get to a place where they need those medications, which are really just treating the symptom, and they never address the root. You really need to slow down, take a step back from the pace of the life that you're in, and do the opposite. You need to do things that are going to encourage regulation of your nervous system, slow things down, allow your brain to have a bit of a reset so it can stop thinking that it's under attack all the time. Our brains are stuck in fight or flight. That's why we have anxiety. So there's a whole bunch of things that you can do to change that. SRT is one of them. It helps you learn how to regulate your own nervous system. You can rewire your entire nervous system with mind-body practices and therapies like SRT. So yes, I think everybody in this century, including kids, should have this kind of a practice. You can meditate if that's your thing. It's shown to reduce the levels of activation in your nervous system. Exercise is huge. Mindfulness is huge. Being bored, learning to be bored and still and do nothing, especially in nature. Massive reset for the nervous system. Reading, cursive handwriting, which they've stopped teaching in some schools, which actually activate some containment pathways in your brain and will help you focus and will help you settle. And we're not doing that anymore. So all of these things are ideas that you can start implementing into your life to reduce your own level of activation. And in that, when you do your own work, your kids will start to regulate also. It's a growing problem. It's not going away. So yes, everybody is experiencing anxiety. Actually, some anxiety is normal. We're supposed to have fluctuations. We're supposed to feel amped up. When the situation warrants it, we're also supposed to be able to come back down to baseline. If you're finding that you can't come back down, that you are amped up all the time, before you go see your doctor, before you go see a psychiatrist, before you go get a label, before you adopt this crazy phrase of high functioning X, Y, and Z diagnosis, go see somebody that does self-regulation therapy or some other kind of mind-body connected work or any kind of therapy, and see if you can start regulating your nervous system on your own, because that's going to treat the root of the problem. You can change your environment. You can slow things down. There are things that you have control over in filtering your media, in changing your technology consumption, in monitoring your own sense of well-being. You can control these things and have lifelong resilience and have lifelong health, where you don't need medications for anxiety, because you are actively working with your system the way it was designed to be able to come back down to baseline. So does everybody need to do something like this? Yes. Everybody needs to do something like this, because our society and our culture is not going to change. The pace is not going to change. So you need to be able to monitor where you're activated, learn how to regulate, take down the activation in your nervous system, and those symptoms of anxiety will go away. Anxiety is just a word. It's about the symptom. The cause is your nervous system has too much hyperarousal in it, too much activation. Depersonalize it. I'm so anxious. No, I'm experiencing activation. I can control this activation. You don't have to own it. It's just activation. Every symptom of a dysregulated nervous system, and anxiety is one of them, is just activation. And there's ways that we can work with it. And there's ways that we can have you be balanced and regulated and happy and not activated and not anxious, that will last with you for the rest of your life. So this is not a life sentence. There's things that you can do with awareness and actual lifestyle practices. And I encourage you to get on it because it's never going to change and it's not stopping. And it's up to you to take control and realize that you're in control of your brain, of your nervous system. You can do things to rewire the entire thing and not have to feel the way that you feel right now. And in the effect of that epigenetically is that it's going to change the level of activation and anxiety symptoms in your entire family, potentially for generations to come, because you all learned from each other's nervous systems. It's very unconscious. To make it so cognitive is not going to fix it. It's unconscious. You can treat it in this way, and then you can get better and get on with your life and try and keep up in a more healthy way that's going to serve you better and your family. So that's my long answer to the one question I get all of the time. There's lots of contributing factors, but there's always something that you can do. Medication's always, always, always the very last resort. I hope you're well. Until next time.